A lot of you don't understand why Trump was so popular. He's what I call an honest liar. I've never seen a white male billionaire screaming, this whole system is rigged. And then he pulled out an Illuminati membership card and chopped a line of cocaine up and did it right at the podium.
That Dave Chappelle monologue might have been, for some, their introduction to the term honest liar. And though he may not have invented the concept, that performance likely helped codify and explain it to a larger audience. But even without the existence of a term, we'd still be familiar with honest liar because we know an honest liar when we see one, and they're even easier to identify when they're on your side.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning, and you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning.
Similar in a sense to anti-heroes, see the previous video, Gangsters and Cowboys. In the political realm, we like honest liars when they lie on our behalf, for the causes and movements we approve of. When the other guy does it, we call it dishonest. But when our guy does it, we call it strategy.
No, I want to work for a man who fights the really good fight and then watch a Republican get elected.
What's the difference? Can you tell?
Yes, I can tell the difference between a man who believes what I believe and lies about it to get elected and a man who just doesn't give a f***. And I'll take the liar.
At the outset, we need to distinguish honest liars from traditional liars, which will be referred to as liar liars. The difference between these two is subtle but important. The liar is a more serious actor, or attempts to play a more serious, believable role. Because of this, they're more likely to believe their own lies, and may have, in fact, internalized or integrated their false persona. This makes their lies more effective, because they're more convincing, at least for a while, and can withstand the scrutiny of the more discerning members of the public. With the liar, it's harder to tell where the man stops and the act begins. Think Barack Obama. This is not to pick on Democrats. What follows is an even-handed criticism for the very fact that politicians, regardless of party, are by default liars.
I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
While it's true that some politicians lie more than others, they all lie. And by the time they've arrived on the political stage, and I do mean stage, they've told 1,000 lies already. Lying is the price of admission to the spaces of power. This is a bipartisan trade practice, and failure to acknowledge it is political naivete. Revisiting the method acting theme discussed in the Jim Carrey-Andy Kaufman video, the liar, regardless of their arena, engages in the method acting of a sincere, believable, authentic character. On the other hand, the honest liar adopts an over-the-top persona. The honest liar may go slightly over the top, laying it on just a bit thick, in service of pathos, or they may go full tilt BS to see what lands.
I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down.
Take former President Bill Clinton as an example of a slightly over-the-top, honest liar.
And I remember just thinking what an incredible country this was, that somebody like me, had no money or anything, would be given the opportunity to meet the president. That's when I decided I could really do public service because I cared so much about people.
Take Donald Trump as an example of a radically over-the-top, honest liar.
And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more. We're going to win so much.
Both approaches appeal to their respective base. Again, both employ pathos. And both emanate a corresponding volume of airborne fertilizer. We like our honest liars because they tend to win elections and a whole lot more. And that's kind of the bottom line when you find yourself invested in the outcome.
This is hardball. Now you telling me that you just discovered that and you don't have the stomach for it?
This is it, Henry. This is a price you pay to lead.
Considering that political elections are necessarily contests between two or more liars, Whoever can lie most convincingly generally wins. Sometimes the winner is the honest liar, sometimes it's the conventional liar. The 2016 presidential election was between honest liar Donald Trump and conventional liar Hillary Clinton. Both candidates told doozies on the campaign trail, and in the end, for various reasons, more Americans preferred Donald Trump's brand of lying over hot sauce Hillary's. That's democracy, and it remains the reality of our political process, but it's hardly new.
The American people like their bullshit out front. That's why they reelected Clinton. Listen, Clinton might be full of shit, but he lets you know it. Clinton said, "Hi, I'm full of shit, and how do you like that?" And the people said, "At least he's honest. At least he's honest about being full of shit."
Outside of politics in the real world, TV and film has given us its share of honest liars, but the infamous 1983 film Scarface, you might have heard of it, stands out among the crowd in crystallizing the modus operandi behind another kind of honest liar, the criminal.
I'm leaving you. I don't need this
I don't want you. I'll take it home.
Let her go, man. Another Quaalude, you're gonna love me again.
Despite the fact that Tony Montana can buy his way into a fancy restaurant thanks to the profits from his narcotics empire, certainly doesn't mean that he belongs there. Tony and everyone in the restaurant are painfully aware of this, particularly after the embarrassing public fight with his drug-addicted trophy wife.
We're looking at. You're all a bunch of You know why? You don't have the guts to be what you want to be.
What Tony lacks in refinement, he makes up for in insight. Tony knows he's a drug lord, and while his fellow diners may or may not know the specifics of his trade, they can surmise based on his race, culture, and demeanor that he's not a legitimate business person, or at the very least, he's an outsider, one who smells of new money, possibly drug money. This honest liar has entered their world and doesn't know or care how to act among polite company. In real life, a group of fancy people in a fancy restaurant are unlikely to be a singular representation of snobbish, moneyed privilege. But this is a movie, and this scene uses Tony's character to indict this group as such, for its own rhetorical purpose. And like any work of fiction, it sacrifices some precision to make its point. Not to stray too far off topic, but it's worth noting the particular flavor of the disdain that exists among some members of the old moneyed class against new money, and vice versa. The distinction is informative. These old money members resent having to share their exclusive private spaces with the new money folks, particularly if the new money members bring with them a lack of situational awareness or refined manners, the kind of manners belonging to the culture and habits that old money members are born into and that they rationally desire to perpetuate indefinitely over generations. Among these types is a belief that, beyond genetics, their customs, habits, and mores distinguish them from the common rabble and are the proof of their superiority. In other words, that their actions and cultures must be the byproducts of their inherent superior state. This is an ideology that runs counter to tabula rasa, or the blank slate theory championed by John Locke, a philosophy respecting the nurture side in the nature versus nurture debate.
That man is a product of a poor environment. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him.
Of course there's something wrong with him. He's a Negro. Probably been stealing since he could crawl.
But just as old money may look down on the new money members may conversely dismiss the old moneyed class for resting on laurels, being uninspired and lazy, or specifically as too far removed from the original labors that built the empires now sustaining their luxurious lifestyles. This is not too different from sports champions who lose their insatiable hunger, that edge that once drove them to the top. Having ascended, albeit illegally, to the 1% through grit and grind, and frankly, to use Tony's own terms, balls, Tony looks back incredulously at the understandably annoyed patrons who have dismissively reduced him to his class. But Tony returns his own judgment in kind.
You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
Because Tony's business requires him to also engage and operate within the seemingly upstanding, non-criminal spheres of banking, policing, and the court system, he's aware that out-in-the-open criminals are not the only people engaged in crime or corruption, and that the business and political worlds not only permit his criminal ventures, but have found clandestine methods of capitalizing on it themselves. And this leaves Tony unimpressed by the self-righteous presentations of the fine, well-to-do pearl clutchers in the room. Beyond knowing that people in polite society are not, by default, good people, he regards their affectation of goodness and decency with little respect, because their kind of decency is an easy luxury of privilege, one bestowed by a money system that allows a rare class of people to live life on cruise control once a certain threshold of wealth has been secured, either legitimately or illegitimately.
What'll I make you? Good? You're not good. You just know how to hide. How to lie.
In a nutshell, honest liars are defined by the quality and quantity of self-awareness that's attached to their presentation. Here, Tony openly and directly concedes what he is to his fellow diners, a criminal forced to hustle in order to be able to sit in the room with them. This is merely an explanation of criminal activity, not a justification of it. He tacitly acknowledges that the reality of his identity is so obvious, so transparent, that you'd have to be a fool not to see it. This fact places Tony's brand of deception a layer or two closer to the reality of who he is on the inside. In a sense, Tony's more honest than the people staring at him. And beyond embarrassment, his frustration is born from his awareness of the moral hypocrisy of it all. If Tony's thoughts could be given words, they'd sound something like this. Yes, I'm eating at this table, and no, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Unlike you, I had to make my spoon. I had to take my spoon. And under what values do you presume that you're better than me?
I don't have that problem. I always tell the truth. Even when I lie.
Tony lands us at an interesting place when he says, "You're not good. You just know how to hide, how to lie. I don't have that problem." Throughout the film, we see Tony continuing to get his hands dirty, even as he moves up the drug game. Unlike the other people in the room, Tony can't easily sell himself on the idea that he's good, certainly not while remaining actively involved in the dark, bloody work that supports his lifestyle. This makes it impossible for Tony to restrict his identity to the material byproducts of his lifestyle, fine dining, luxury cars, and mansions. Despite having creature comforts, Tony lacks a legitimate professional profile, or basically an avatar, to vouch for his decency. Tony's reputation, or lack of one, exposes him as an outsider, and outsiders to these spaces must be bad, because if they're not, they run the risk of implicating the insiders as well.
So say good night to the bad guy. The last time you're gonna see a bad guy like this again, let me tell you. Make way for the bad guy. There's a bad guy coming through. Better get out of his way.
Beyond the requisite self-awareness, the honest liar is differentiated from the typical liar through the disclosure inherent to their presentation. With no cover or reputation to precede him, Tony cannot pretend to be anything other than someone who has sought personal advantage with little regard to consequence. This fact is baked into his presentation and is the primary part of his honest lie. On top of his thick accent, even the subtleties of his posture and facial expression betray any notion that he belongs in that restaurant. And this is all the ammunition the people in the room need to maintain their sense of inherent superiority relative to Tony. But when your wealth can essentially be automated to create its own wealth, and you can easily thrive off of capital earnings as opposed to hustle and labor, you have to have a profound lack of self-awareness to remain in a prolonged state of snobbery and bemoan the lack of enterprise or the moral fitness of others, particularly when your rarefied privilege requires the doing and risking of so little. Before the dynamic Barack Obama arrived on the scene in 2004, Boomers and Gen Xers were treated to a trial run of the first charismatic Democratic presidential nominee since JFK. He arrived in the person of William Jefferson Clinton. The Republicans, who had enjoyed their own smooth-talking leader in Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, had just come off of 12 years of owning the White House. But for the Democrats, it was time for a change. They had just lost 3 consecutive elections with the help of their uncharismatic crew of flunkies, all of whom seemed less shiny and cool than their opponents, and all of whom were not compelling enough in the sales department. Enter Bill Clinton, or in the case of the 1998 film Primary Colors, enter Jack Stanton, the embodiment of Clinton, played by John Travolta. Travolta is convincing as Stanton, or Clinton, part of which is owed to his features. The role benefits from Travolta's large face and big, toothy smile, which evoked Clinton's Southern charm. A smart choice of casting, to be sure. Prior to Clinton, the voting public witnessed the lackluster efforts of one-term President Jimmy Carter, as well as Walter Mondale and Michael Dukakis, all of whom attempted to appeal to the supposed maturity of the voter to recognize the necessity for sacrifice in the face of late 70s inflation, increasing concerns about energy shortages, and tensions with the former Soviet Union. Sound familiar? But from 1980 to 1992, what was really killing the Democrats before they could get off the ground was their willingness to be more candid than they are today about their desire to raise taxes to achieve their lofty ambitions. And it went over like a lead balloon. Even a sprinkle of honesty, as it turned out, was not the best policy. And the DNC would learn, or relearn, the lesson that when you want to accomplish something, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Campaigning for the presidency in 1991, despite being a wonk that could break down policy specifics, Bill Clinton was smart enough to emphasize the emotional, pathos, over the rational, logos. The key to effective communication, particularly in advertising and politics, is pandering to the emotional needs of the audience without making it seem like you're doing so. Bill Clinton knew this, and his motion picture stand-in knows it as well.
So I want you to know that I understand what you're doing. I appreciate it. When people say to me, Jack Stan, why do you spend so much time and effort in adult literacy? And I say to them because it gives me a chance to see courage.
Savvy political pundits and disillusioned left-wing voters couldn't help but recognize the smoothness of Bill Clinton's game. It felt different than what they'd been getting, and smelled like victory. And people started to believe in the donkey again, and the ends would justify the means of their honest liar.
And that's the kind of man you want to work for. Somebody who just wants to get elected.
I can tell the difference between a man who believes what I believe and lies about it to get elected and a man who just doesn't give a f***. And I'll take the liar.
Our liar, liar, and honest liar concepts can be taken further by recognizing the subjective and fluid nature of both. One can easily be mistaken for the other, and both can bleed into the other. And a person can mutate from liar, liar to honest liar based on the savviness of the audience or the simple passage of sufficient time, because most lies or grifts have an expiration date. At the point when the spiel or grift expires and people have figured out the act, a formerly convincing liar, liar becomes an honest liar automatically. This is because in order to tell a lie, you have to know the truth. Of course, this means that liars, as a rule, already know the truth. And once that truth is acknowledged, either by the liar or the person being lied to, the continued faux sincerity of the liar becomes irrelevant, and the act ineffective. And when this happens, a liar is rendered a de facto honest liar, or more accurately, an exposed liar. It's no longer under their control. The only hope for exposed liars is to find new, unsuspecting populations of suckers to start the grift all over again. Unfortunately, this can and does happen, well beyond the anecdotal level. It's why some of the major moral lessons of civilizations in history are often cyclical. In fact, it's our children and the youth of any culture or country that are always the next potentially vulnerable marks for advertisers, demagogues, and the media writ large. Keeping the next generations ignorant merely comes at the expense of the entire world.
This is hardball. Now, you telling me that you just discovered that and you don't have the stomach for it? This is it, Henry. This is the price you pay to lead. You don't think that Abraham Lincoln was a whore before he was a president?
We return to the 1990s in primary colors because they reflect an important historical theme about Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, his time in office, and ourselves. To avoid burying the lead, the prevailing theme of that time, and of our time, is compromise. Compromise is intimately tethered to the balance between growth and entropy, expansion and contraction, life and death. This is not some YouTuber being dramatic. This is reality. Liar liars and honest liars, whether they call themselves Democrat or Republican, gay or straight, Christian or atheist, want us to compromise, get us to compromise, and the result is always decay. Don't mistake this as an attack on any of those aforementioned groups or categories. This is an acknowledgement that compromise and corruption are always, at root, the actual problems.
You don't think that Abraham Lincoln was a whore before he was a president? He had to tell his little stories and smile his shit-eating backcountry grin. And he did it just so that he would one day have the opportunity to stand in front of the nation and appeal to the better angels of our nature. And that's where the bullshit stops.
Or that's what we'd like to believe. And don't you wish it was true? It sure sounds good, but it doesn't ever happen. And we'll get to that in a bit. In the real world, Bill Clinton's presidency moved the Democrats closer to the Republicans in fundraising dollars, and the party enjoyed a resurgence in their ability to galvanize its voting base. But for the more ideologically pure Democrat voter, Clinton's social liberalism could not conceal some of his more fiscally right-wing tells. A massive, big business-friendly Continental Trade Agreement signing, NAFTA, reforms to the welfare payout system, as well as his fair share of politically convenient, saber-rattling rhetoric towards the Middle East. Media fairy tales aside, economically speaking, the two exclusively viable American political parties came to resemble each other much more closely toward the turn of the century, and arguably, they were never that far apart to begin with. But during this time, it became ever more apparent that Blue Team and Red Team were, for all their sound and fury, on the same team. Team Compromise, led by its fearless captain, Honest Liar.
That's what it's all about, so we have the opportunity to make the most of it, to do it the right way. You know as well as I do, there are plenty of people playing this game that don't think that way. They're willing to sell their souls, crawl through sewers, lie to people, divide them, play on their worst fears for nothing, just for the prize.
Cool story, bro. That kind of speech is very alluring to idealistic dreamers, and it worked quite well for this honest liar. But as with any Faustian bargain or monkey paw, there's always a back end that winds up hitting you in the back end. Leaders who compromise morality in pursuit of power, and their supporters who themselves compromise by overlooking such compromises, receive poetic justice when their efforts produce their inevitably compromised corrosive byproducts. It never fails to fail. The inability to remember that the lesser of two evils is evil shows a lack of appreciation for the danger of moral compromise, as well as the ability of humans to rationalize anything for power. Because every action has a reaction, process always matters. How you play the game always matters. As we compromise, to the degree that we do, the process is often too subtle to notice, but in its slowness is where the danger lies. Our failure to smell the burning of brush allows us to walk away from the very fires we start. Through the unyielding, ever-present, permitting, tolerating, and compromising, we lengthen a self-sustaining, unbroken chain of evil. Each link, compelling us to compromise toward the next. Until we insist on doing better, not from others, but from ourselves, things will necessarily get worse.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
Well, maybe you need to do better, Captain Condom. We must consider and include the double-edged nature of compromise, or specifically the role of compromise in any process. This relates to the earlier contention that process matters. And in relation to politics, process matters in a unique way. Compromising or compromised candidates, comfortable with cover-ups and shady deals as necessary shortcuts to power, would seem unlikely to break the habit. Even when the compromises made seem insignificant, the fact that a candidate has already knuckled under relatively benign offers further underscores that they're ill-equipped to resist the more tempting and sinister demands that await them once seated in power.
See, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talk about it. But what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son.
And so, a candidate, a liar, or an honest liar, filled with idealism, might run for office starting from point A to destination point B. Along the way to point B, they lay down their moral burden, little by little, in pursuit of good, of course. But the compromises continue until they arrive at their destination and no core value remains. And this is what happens to our politicians, our liars. And it's why there is no political solution to our troubled evolution. Thank you, Gordon Sumner.
In the end, Henry, who can do this better than me? Think about it. Don't shake your head, Henry. We worked so hard together to get here. And it's there for us now, right there. We can do incredible things.
To the more extreme political and moral compromisers among us, what good does it do you to win at any cost at the expense of your soul? It's certainly worth considering the cost, personally and societally, of indulging the whims of liars, and the cost of participating so enthusiastically in a world that compels us to lie or believe lies, either to win or to fit in.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
Yeah, I don't think so. Thanks for listening.